reason people don't become really good investors is because they've been told that investing is complicated, it takes too much time, and you're too busy, so leave it up to everybody else. But then they go by a completely different set of rules, which is usually cash flow, which is leverage, which is, hey, high risk equals high returns for you, low risk, high returns for me, because it's your money that I'm risking in this, not my own, and I'm now getting a percentage of a much bigger pile because it's not just your money, it's everybody else's. And even if they lose the money or they have losses, they get the lessons. And they get to now carry that knowledge on into the future of what they do next and adjust to what's happening. So the way that you get exponentially better at investing is you know your investor DNA. Your investor DNA comes down to what do you value, right? And we talked about those different values here of brainstorming, connecting the dots, being able to research, being able to invent something, being congruent with it. That's all your values. You listed those values out. Then it's also related to that is what drives you, right? So this is all part of your investor DNA because you're going like, well, dude, I want to learn new things and I want to see something nobody else understands and be able to bring something together in a combination nobody else has brought. Like all that lights you up. Then you say, well, what are your greatest competencies, right? And you have the ability to write. You have the ability to promote. You have the ability to, all of those factors is your investor DNA. Now, if you decide you're going to click a mouse to trade a stock, you go back to linear, you go back to being in a basement looking at a computer, which you said speaks to some people, but not necessarily to you because it has nothing to do with what your overall skill sets are. That is process-oriented, not project-oriented, not exponential. So what happens is if you have a project like what you're talking about, like with my book built relationship capital that wouldn't have existed without that book. It seems intangible. Sometimes it's long-term, but if Caleb doesn't write a book, I don't know Caleb. If I don't write a book, Caleb doesn't know me. This was a project that brought out so many relationships over so many years to the point where there's someone that runs this massive division for Bank of America, reads the book, loves it, changes his finance, even though he's working with people that have billions of dollars because of the philosophy in that. And then he's like, hey, how can we meet? We meet, all of a sudden we've already accelerated the relationship 3, 4, 5 years because I'm doing work while I'm sleeping because he's reading that book and finding whether it resonates or not. So in that process, I become a better writer. So I'm building all this mental capital, right? I'm learning about an industry. I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about how I can build all these relationships. And the book then leads to this challenge that we talked about, 401k hoax, which actually got a lot more return than just the book. But now we are 15 years later, the book's still paying off, and it set me up to write other books. That all of a sudden, my entire knowledge base, because I had to learn about what is it that are the myths out there, dissect it. It's an exponential investment because of who I am because of the investment, how I relate to finance in general, money, quality of life. So it's all the mental and relationship capital. And exponential investing builds both mental capital and relationship capital. Your project's about to build mental and relationship capital. What can you learn from all the people that you would interview? And what relationships you'll build with them because you've now promoted them and you've got them interested in being part of it because if they can have it be more successful, they're more successful. So you're touching all these leverage points where everybody else is going, I'm going to buy a fourplex. Okay, that's more leverage than a mutual fund, but what are you learning from your tenants? Excuse me for just a second. I know I'm interrupting your video, but it's because I'm really excited about this. Disrupting Sacred Cows, my newest book. It's new, it's fresh. It's about all of the things that have to do with our relationship to money, the things that hold us back and how to, kind of peek into that, be able to resolve that. And ultimately, with the new economy and everything that's happening and moving so quickly, it is timely to help you to have more success in your finances. So go ahead and click the link if you want to grab this book and dive on in. What are you learning from talking to the banker on getting a loan long-term? It's not something that is overly congruent with what your investor DNA is, so it ends up taking effort and force versus flow. So you see the exponential investing that happens when there's multiple dimensions. There's 3 dimensions to that. Number 1, can it cash flow? So how sustainable is the cash flow? How long can that cash flow come in? Number 2, could it grow in value as far as an appreciating asset? And number three, can you personally connect to it in a way that fulfills you, that develops mental and relationship capital? Now try to compare any other investment that's in a retirement plan. It just seems foolish. But everybody that's investing in the stock market, this is my opinion, is funding everybody else's dream before they've really funded their own. And if you're not a visionary, that's fine. But if you're a visionary, you're now sacrificing your vision to fund things that you have why would a Fortune 500 company be like, hey, we're going to diversify, so we're going to go give our competitor a whole bunch of money? It doesn't make sense. But that's essentially what people with visions are doing, that are putting it into, institutions that are funding things that might be directly competitive with everything that they're doing, and that doesn't help them succeed. So look for the exponential investing that ends up engaging your energy, mental capital, relationship capital, equity, cash flow, and fulfillment, and it's a game changer.
The vision.
Is that what's going into Win Then Play?
Yeah, that's definitely one of these chapters that but I have never thought of the component of relationship capital that comes as a byproduct.
Yeah.
Because when you invent something,
Yeah.
it is something that intrigues people. Here's a perfect example. You watch it. I don't know if were you there the whole time I spoke at Caleb's?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It was Crystal that left. It's I walked out there, I didn't know everybody's reading my stuff. I didn't know everybody was connected to it. That's the relationship capital that made things exponential, that now we're like, oh, hey, we could build, the tax brain trust, and we already have all this relationship capital, because this is something that we're uniquely knowing, and it could be much higher rate of return than any other external investment. So I have a lot of friends that are starting businesses right now, and Corey's funded his friends' businesses in the past. The problem with that is it's never exponential because it's their business. I'm not influencing it in any way, shape, or form. It's not my core values. It's not my core drivers. It's not my core abilities. So all I'm doing is being the cash. And when cash is the only reason we invest, we lose a sense of our own energy, because what happens is when those investments either delay or don't pay off to the same level, we judge ourselves harshly about something we had very little control over, and it actually puts us into a scarcity mindset. And now we're thinking about what we didn't get rather than thinking about what we can create. So what happens when you invest in an exponential way, you still have moments where you're like, okay, so I'm sitting on a comedy special I put $503,000 into. We haven't truly monetized it, but you know what? I was just on a stage last week, or on Friday, $20,000 for that stage. Was on a stage in February, $25,000 for that stage. I'm on a stage coming up, $18,000. That's decent returns on that, and it's doing something I want to do when I'm on that stage anyway. So over time, but the other thing is, Caleb and I ended up reconnecting because of comedy. We reconnected because I was calling to fill venues, and someone's like, hey, have you talked to Caleb? And I was like, well, I know Caleb. So I called Caleb, and he's like, actually, I'm thinking about doing this and this. And I was like, well, actually, I should do immersion with you, right? So all of that starts to happen because of relationship capital. And to me, investment devoid of relationship capital is hollow and unfulfilling and actually misleading, because now we're starting to chase something. So even my philosophy in crypto was at one time I should, get involved in crypto simply because I like decentralization, and I like the notion of the entire philosophy of blockchain and all this. But then it was no, the reason I should invest there is because I think NFTs will change community. I think NFTs will create smart contracts that start to democratize the world for artists and allow them to actually be more successful, and to start cutting out the middlemen and gatekeepers that are preventing us from getting the center of value. And I'm like, okay, that's what I should invest in that for. And actually, when I did that, I got much better returns. And I was like, oh, this thing's kind of a cool coin, and I'm going to put money over there. But it's I realized I had no control over that outcome. And even if Ethereum doesn't perform, the thing is, there's so much built on that platform that's useful to everything that we're doing. I feel connected to it. Mm-hmm. So how connected are you to that investment? How congruent is it so that you can accelerate those results? And how much does it present more community and relationship capital and mental capital, because you're going to have to learn things about yourself and grow as an individual, making an investment in what you do. You want to know why people don't do it? Because they're afraid that it doesn't work out, because of imposter syndrome, because of, they say they don't have time. That's merely an excuse, because they don't want to take that leap of faith, because everything extraordinary when it comes to investing is something that is a leap of faith, a bit of invention, a mixture of some checkered roads that are a little bit hard to get to, and I just think that we've misidentified investing. It's one thing to get information, it's another to watch it in action. Wealth Labs gives you that lab feel. You're like, oh, this isn't it right here where something's being cooked up in the financial world, in prosperity, in dissecting what's actually going on. So if you enjoy these conversations and these teachings, well, click onto another video and drop right in for another Wealth Labs episode.